You know, that particular kind of exhaustion that doesn't come from physical effort or sleepless nights, but from a conversation that seemed ordinary on the surface? The kind that leaves you strangely hollow afterward. You hang up the phone or walk away from the room, and there's that familiar sinking in your chest, as if you've just spilled something precious inside yourself. You spent 20 minutes explaining why you changed jobs, why you ended a relationship, why you didn't attend an event, why you chose silence instead of reaction. And now you feel like a defense attorney for your own soul, pleading a case before a jury that never really cared to understand. The words keep echoing inside you long after the dialogue ends, each sentence a small leak in a vessel meant to hold something sacred. And it isn't anger you feel. It's depletion, a subtle psychic fatigue that no rest can restore. Because somewhere deep down, you know, you've been trading your essence for approval. You've been trying to earn the right to be misunderstood. Carl Gustav Jung once wrote that what we call fatigue is often the loss of psychic energy, not through action, but through disconnection from the self. He named this inner vitality libido, not in the shallow sense of desire, but as the total life force that fuels our becoming. Every time you justify yourself to someone who cannot meet you in truth, you are not communicating. You are hemorrhaging that force. The sacred fuel meant to build your individuality is being spent convincing others that your existence is acceptable. You see, self-help books will tell you to set boundaries, to say no, to protect your peace. But that's like telling a drowning person to swim harder without noticing the anchor tied to their ankles. You've tried that, haven't you? You've said no, and yet afterward, the guilt floods in. That heavy pressure in your chest, that inner voice whispering, "You should have explained more." They'll think you're selfish. They'll think you're cold. This isn't weakness, it's programming. The guilt you feel after protecting your own boundaries isn't moral. It's inherited. Jung would call it an introjection, the internalized voice of authority figures. Parents, teachers, partners, all merged into one inner tribunal. That's who you're really trying to appease. The person in front of you is just a projection screen. You're not trying to convince them. You're trying to silence the ghost of their judgment that lives inside your own psyche. Friedrich Nietzsche would call this ghost the child of the herd morality, the invisible code that rewards obedience, humility, and sameness, while punishing individuality as arrogance. Society has trained you not to act with authenticity, but to justify authenticity. To make sure every step you take is pre-approved by the collective mind. So you perform an ancient ritual of self-defense, constructing explanations, arguments, apologies, to prove that you are still safe, still predictable, still one of them. But here's the paradox. Every explanation you give to the wrong audience is an act of psychic disempowerment. You think you're clarifying. You're actually confessing. You think you're building understanding. You're paying tribute to a false god, the god of approval. The collective demands your confession, and you comply, not out of respect, but out of fear. Think of it this way. Your psyche is a courtroom built long before you were conscious of it. The judge sits high above, composed of all the shoulds and oughts you absorbed growing up. Every time someone questions your choices, that inner judge awakens, slams the gavel, and demands evidence. So you gather your words, your justifications, your tone of reason, trying to win a trial that never ends. You are both the accused and the accuser. And when it's over, when you finally prove yourself, you feel a temporary relief, the way a prisoner might feel after confessing to something he didn't do, just to stop the interrogation. But beneath that relief, something darker stirs. A quiet grief. The grief of betraying your own authority. You can sense it, can't you? The faint awareness that the act of explaining is not an exchange, it's a drain. It's the slow, invisible loss of psychic blood. Jung warned that the libido, when misdirected toward external validation, mutates into anxiety and fatigue. The soul starves in the act of convincing others it is worthy to exist. Stay with me. Because if this truth is beginning to resonate, You're about to uncover something even deeper, something that explains why this pattern is so hard to break. The reason isn't in your willpower or your communication skills. It's philosophical. It's existential. It's about the moral architecture of the world you were born into. Nietzsche saw it clearly. The moral codes of society were never designed to empower the individual. They were designed to preserve the herd. The group fears difference because difference threatens stability. So the herd invents a moral system. The good equals obedience, politeness, predictability. The bad equals defiance, silence, sovereignty. You grew up breathing that air. It's in your nervous system. That's why even when you know you don't owe an explanation, you still feel like you do. It's not reason that binds you. It's centuries of conditioning whispering, explain yourself or risk exile. But what if you no longer obeyed that voice? What if the discomfort that follows your silence wasn't guilt, but withdrawal? The early tremor of freedom. There's a darker truth beneath this. A truth about energy, authority, and the secret transaction hidden in every justification. Because you think you're buying peace, but you're actually paying with power. When Jung spoke about psychic energy, he didn't just describe it as a vague concept. He saw it as the living current that animates every thought, desire, and act of creation within you. Imagine it as the inner fire that pushes the seed through the soil, the same force that compels you to grow, to express, to become. Every moment you choose to justify yourself unnecessarily, you puncture the vessel that holds this fire. You let the sacred heat escape through invisible cracks, not realizing that the warmth you give away will not return. That's why, after long explanations, you feel cold, not emotionally, but spiritually. You've spent your fuel defending a truth that needed no defense. You might think that this habit of explaining is harmless, maybe even noble, that it's a way of maintaining peace or connection. But Jung would tell you that the psyche is not fooled by appearances. It knows when you've betrayed your essence. And each time you do, the unconscious records it as a debt. The body then whispers the balance due through fatigue, anxiety, or that quiet resentment that blooms behind politeness. It's your inner world telling you that something sacred has been misused. You believe you're seeking understanding, but what you're really seeking is absolution, the permission to exist without guilt. And because you've handed that permission over to others, you remain spiritually indebted to their approval. This is why the smallest disagreement can feel like a threat to your entire identity. Because somewhere you've mistaken being accepted for being safe. Let's go deeper. The need to explain is not a moral flaw. It's an inherited survival mechanism. For thousands of years, the collective has trained the individual to justify every act of difference. It's how groups maintain cohesion. Nietzsche called this the morality of the herd, the invisible leash that keeps the wolves from remembering they are wolves. The herd wants predictability, not passion. Compliance, not consciousness. So it rewards docility and shames deviation. That shame is the origin of your compulsive explanations. You learned long ago that silence after a decision makes people uneasy, that when you don't justify yourself, the air thickens with unspoken judgment, and so you speak. You soften, you apologize for the edges of your truth. You've been conditioned to believe that being misunderstood is dangerous. But Nietzsche would tell you that this very danger is the gateway to your sovereignty. The moment you stop trying to be understood by the herd, you begin to understand yourself. Picture it like this. Your justifications are currency in an invisible economy of approval. Every time you explain, you pay into a system that profits from your insecurity. You believe you're purchasing harmony, but you're actually funding your own subordination. The herd doesn't care about your reasons. It only cares that you keep playing the game. And there's something tragic about that, isn't there? The idea that your brilliance, your nuance, your wild inner life, all of it, gets reduced to an argument meant to make someone else comfortable. It's like taking a constellation and trying to compress it into a bullet point. You were never meant to fit into the courtroom of collective morality. You were meant to build your own temple. Think about the last time you tried to justify something deeply personal. Maybe it was a relationship you ended that others didn't understand. Maybe it was a creative risk, a spiritual decision, a period of withdrawal. Remember how your voice trembled slightly when you tried to make it sound reasonable? That trembling wasn't weakness. It was truth resisting distortion. It was the soul struggling not to betray itself in the language of conformity. Jung would call this struggle the individuation process, the sacred tension between who you truly are and who the world wants you to be. The individuation process is not gentle. It's violent in its honesty. It demands that you disappoint others to remain whole. It asks you to stand before misunderstanding and not explain yourself, to let the silence stretch long enough for your nervous system to remember that disapproval isn't death. If this reflection is stirring something in you, stay with me, because we're about to walk into the heart of this inner courtroom and confront the judge himself, the voice that has ruled your inner world for far too long. Inside your psyche, there's a hall of echoes. Every criticism you've ever received, every moment you were asked to justify your difference, reverberates there. Over time, those echoes fused into a singular authority, a faceless judge who now sits behind the bench of your thoughts. When someone questions your decision, it's not their question that wounds you. It's the judge's gavel that falls inside your mind. You feel the verdict before you even speak. You owe them an explanation. This inner judge doesn't shout. It whispers with the calm cruelty of habit. It tells you to make others comfortable, to smooth the edges of your truth, to provide context so no one thinks less of you. It masquerades as morality, but it's actually fear. Fear of losing belonging, fear of standing alone, fear of being labeled as cold or arrogant. But here's the secret Jung left for us. The judge is not real. He is a projection of the collective you once needed to survive. He has no power except the one you continue to grant him. And Nietzsche would say, the moment you see through that illusion, you have already begun the work of transvaluation. You begin to replace the values of the herd with your own. What was once rude becomes clear. What was once selfish becomes sacred. What was once explaining yourself becomes wasting your divinity. There's a darker truth beneath this, a truth that hums in the space between guilt and freedom, the truth that you have been performing obedience in the language of politeness, mistaking it for connection. So let's step deeper into that dark chamber, the space where obedience hides behind charm, where you smile while shrinking, where you offer long explanations that no one asked for just to keep the peace. That's where most people live without realizing it, in a subtle performance of justification that disguises itself as kindness. But kindness that costs you your authenticity is not kindness, it's self-erasure in disguise. And that erasure is exactly what drains your psychic energy, the way a candle exhausts itself trying to light an entire cathedral. Jung believed that every act of repression creates a corresponding shadow, a psychological residue that doesn't disappear but waits, gathering force, demanding expression. Every time you swallow your truth to avoid discomfort, every time you explain yourself when silence would have been enough, you strengthen that shadow. It begins to grow impatient, whispering through anxiety, through resentment, through the silent thought, why do I always have to explain myself? That question is your shadow knocking. It's the unacknowledged part of you that knows your worth doesn't require evidence. But before the shadow can become power, it must be faced. Nietzsche said, one must still have chaos in oneself to give birth to a dancing star. The chaos he spoke of isn't violence. It's vitality, the raw, unfiltered energy of the self that refuses to be domesticated by approval. Facing your chaos means allowing the discomfort of being misunderstood without rushing to fix it. It means standing in the storm of someone's disapproval and realizing that you don't die from it. You're reborn by it. Imagine the next time someone asks you, why did you do that? And instead of offering your usual essay of explanations, you answer simply, because it felt right. Then you stop. You hold the silence. You resist the reflex to soften your edges. That silence will feel heavy, electric. It will expose everyone's discomfort, including your own. But that silence is not weakness. It's energy containment. It's the first moment your soul refuses to leak. At first, your body will rebel, your chest might tighten, your breath may quicken, your mind will scramble to fill the void with words. That's the old programming, the herd morality trying to reclaim its servant. But if you stay still, if you let the discomfort burn through you, something miraculous happens. The guilt begins to dissolve, and beneath it, you feel an unfamiliar sensation, gravity, presence, the beginning of authority. You've reclaimed the psychic energy that used to pour out through justification, and now it pools inside you like molten gold. This is what Jung meant by opus contra naturam, the work against nature. Not against the external world, but against your own conditioned nature. Your instinct is to explain, to smooth, to seek harmony. The opus demands the opposite, to hold tension, to endure misunderstanding, to transmute guilt into grounded power. It's alchemy through silence. You see, silence isn't just the absence of sound. It's a psychological furnace. When you refuse to explain yourself, all the energy that would have escaped through your words remains trapped within your psyche. It burns, it refines, it strengthens. That fire becomes willpower. It becomes magnetism. It becomes the invisible armor that Nietzsche described when he spoke of the sovereign individual, the one who has learned to give laws to himself. So when you practice this silence, you're not being passive. You're performing sacred restraint. You're saying, my truth doesn't need witnesses to exist. You're withdrawing your energy from the herd's economy and reinvesting it in your own soul. And the more you do this, the more reality begins to shift around you. People start to sense something different, not arrogance, not detachment, but density. You feel heavier, not in spirit, but in presence. You walk into a room and no longer need to explain why you're there. Your silence speaks for you. The herd senses that your energy is no longer available for debate, and so it stops demanding justification. That's how true authority is born, not through dominance, but through self-containment. If this is resonating with you, stay with me. Because what comes next is the moment of transvaluation, where everything you were taught about morality, guilt, and approval flips upside down. Nietzsche called it the revaluation of all values. It's the process of taking the concepts the herd used to control you and rewriting their meaning. For example, you were taught that silence equals rudeness. But in truth, silence can be integrity, the refusal to speak from fear. You were told that selfishness is sin. But true selfishness is often the seed of self-respect, the recognition that your energy is sacred and must not be squandered. You were told that explaining yourself shows empathy, but real empathy begins when you stop using explanations to buy love. This transvaluation doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual dismantling of inherited moral reflexes. It requires courage to disappoint, to unsettle, to hold the line when others push for your reasoning. But every time you resist the urge to justify, you perform a small act of rebellion against the herd, and a small act of devotion to yourself. Remember this. People who demand explanations are rarely looking for truth. They're looking for reassurance that you haven't changed too much. Your evolution threatens the stability of their world. They ask why, not to understand you, but to pull you back into a familiar shape. When you stay silent, you force them to face their discomfort, and you free yourself from the cycle of apology disguised as communication. There's a darker truth beneath this still, a truth about transformation, about what happens when you finally stop offering pieces of yourself to make others comfortable. When you stop offering those pieces of yourself, something ancient begins to awaken, a kind of gravity that doesn't shout or demand, but simply is. It's the quiet return of your essence, the reclamation of psychic territory you didn't even realize had been colonized by the opinions of others. The moment you refuse to explain, you're no longer negotiating with the world for the right to exist. You're declaring that existence itself is your right, no permission required. At first, this newfound silence feels lonely. People may pull away. Some will accuse you of arrogance or coldness because your detachment disrupts their emotional economy. They're used to feeding on your justifications, used to you filling the silence with reasons that soothe their insecurity. When that source dries up, they must confront their own discomfort. That's not your burden to carry anymore. Jung would say this is when individuation becomes real, when the self, once diluted by collective demands, begins to crystallize into something sovereign and whole. As your energy returns, you notice how much of your life was spent performing clarity for others. You used to think of explanation as connection, but now you see it was often a transaction, your energy in exchange for temporary validation. You begin to value your words differently. Each one feels heavier, more deliberate. You stop offering paragraphs where a single sentence would suffice. Sometimes even that feels excessive, and so you give nothing but presence, the kind of silence that unsettles and heals in equal measure. Nietzsche's will to power was never about dominance over others. It was about mastery over the internal chaos that once made you desperate to please. When you no longer need to justify your boundaries, your choices, or your silence, that will to power becomes serenity. It's not about controlling the room. It's about not being controlled by it. That is the highest form of authority, not given, not taken, but radiated. Let's make this practical. The next time you feel the impulse to explain yourself, pause. Notice the sensation in your body, the subtle rush of adrenaline, the tightening in your throat, the racing thoughts trying to find the perfect words. That's the moment of choice. Ask yourself, who am I really trying to convince right now? The person in front of me, or the echo of the judge within? When you can see the difference, you've already loosened the chain. Then, practice retention. Give a short answer, calm, clear, complete. I can't. I won't. That's not for me. Then stop. Let the silence breathe. It will feel unbearable at first, like standing on the edge of an emotional cliff. But that edge is where you meet your true self. Resist the urge to fill the void. That discomfort you feel is not danger, it's detox. It's your nervous system recalibrating to a new standard of sovereignty. You might notice your heart racing, your mind creating imaginary rebuttals. That's the herd morality dying inside you. Let it. The more you withstand it, the more you realize that guilt is just a phantom pain from an identity that's no longer yours. You don't need to earn peace, you become peace when you stop explaining. And then comes the final stage, transvaluation, Nietzsche's sacred rebellion. You begin to define your own metrics for worth. You stop measuring your goodness by how comfortable others feel around you. Instead, you measure it by how aligned you feel within yourself. Your values become your compass, not the crowd's applause, but the quiet certainty in your gut that whispers, "This is right for me." You create your own declaration of values, not written on paper, but carved into your behavior. My time is sacred. My energy is finite. My silence is not emptiness, it's precision. These become the laws of your inner republic. You no longer perform morality, you embody integrity. And slowly, something extraordinary happens. People begin to sense that you no longer play by the invisible rules of justification. They can't quite articulate it, but they feel it. Their questions soften, their tone changes. They stop demanding explanations, not because you've trained them, but because your presence now communicates what words never could, that your essence is not up for debate. This is the transformation Jung hinted at, when psychic energy, once scattered through endless justification, returns home. It condenses, solidifies, becomes a field around you. Nietzsche would call this your sovereign aura, the silent proof that you've transvalued guilt into strength. You don't need to announce it. The world adjusts instinctively to your new vibration. The ones who once interrogated your motives now hesitate. The ones who tested your boundaries now sense the futility. It's as if your silence itself has become a boundary, not a wall, but a gravitational pull that says, "Come closer only if you can meet me in respect." This is not arrogance. This is spiritual economy. The less you explain, the more your words are worth. The less you justify, the more your presence commands. And the irony is, once you stop trying to be understood, people finally begin to understand you. Not through logic, but through resonance. So you see, they never deserved your explanations, not because they were evil or small-minded, but because your explanations were never meant for them in the first place. They were fragments of your psychic energy, searching for home. Now you know where that home is. It's within. The moment you realize this, a profound peace settles in your bones. You don't need to retreat from the world. You simply move through it differently. Your silence becomes fluent, your choices unapologetic, your energy sovereign. And when someone asks, "Why are you so quiet lately?" you'll smile, not from superiority, but from freedom, and answer gently, because not everything deserves a translation. Because in the end, you've learned the deepest truth. They don't deserve your explanation. Your energy is sacred. Your silence is your power. And you finally are no longer available for audits. You're too busy living.